All right, thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Monique Norfolk, and I am excited to be here as a partner with the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization as we discuss nonprofit governance, becoming an exceptional board on purpose. I am going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can walk through today's presentation. Okay, whoops. All right. So today we're going to kind of walk through these items here. We're going to start with some welcomes and introductions from the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization. We have Eugenia, who is the vice president of the board, and so we look forward to hearing from her a little bit about Mosaic Beginnings, house rules, and then all things board governance, which is why you're here. We'll also share with you a little more information about accessing the password protected site. And then with the follow-up email, there will be a survey. And so without further ado, I would like to welcome Eugenia to speak on behalf of the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization.
Thank you, Monique. Good morning, everyone. And I want to welcome you to the St. Louis Philanthropic's governance workshop. Monique is going to really wow you, I guarantee you. And we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. And hopefully it will be productive and beneficial for you and your nonprofit organization. Some of you may be familiar with the St. Louis Philanthropic, and some of you may not. A little bit of the history. We began in 1984 as a result of a lawsuit, and that lawsuit garnered $8 million that was put in a trust fund to be distributed throughout the city of St. Louis to nonprofit organizations that were doing work to better the lives of the citizens in the St. Louis city. We have been around that long doing what we hope and pray is good work in helping other nonprofits to help our citizens. We're currently governed by a board of directors comprised of community volunteers. We're all volunteers. We all live in the city of St. Louis. A lot of us have been on the board for 10 plus years, but we are we're actually adding some new board members, and hopefully as you continue to follow our Facebook page and our website, you'll see the new members who have come aboard. Over the years since 1984, we've allocated lots and lots of money. It is incredible what we've been able to do to grow that $8 million that was given to us and be able to have a lot more money to share with the St. Louis city. Some of our key accomplishments. Oh, well, we went to the mission statement. Okay. As it states, our mission statement, the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization provides funding and capacity building to nonprofit organizations whose programs and services advance the quality of the St. Louis city residents. And we have stuck true to that statement over the years. And if you go to our website, you'll be able to see some of the agencies that we have provided funds for and the work that they're doing. Our guiding principles, impact focused. We are definitely trying to make an impact. And that's one of the reasons that we created these capacity building workshops, to become more impactful. We're community oriented. We try hard to make sure that people know about us. And I'm probably going to say this many times, but we do want you to go to our Facebook page and follow us so you can see the things that we are doing in the community. We're committed. We are volunteers, but we are very committed to what what we do, and we have accountability to not only the organizations that we fund, but we also have accountability to each other to do the best job that we can for you. And racial equity is something that is uppermost in our focus to be able to make sure that things are being done that are equal and equitable to everyone. And respect is one of our most important guiding principles, because we want to respect our recipients. We want to respect the community that we are a part of, and respect each other as board members and our grantees. So
I wanted to say thank you so much for that. I would love to hear about some of those key accomplishments that you were going to share as well. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we have become an independent, freestanding entity. And by that, I mean, we were, from the beginning, actually, we were appointed to the board, and the board was actually governed more or less by the St. Louis Board of Aldermen. But we have become a freestanding board now. The Board of Aldermen does not have any power anymore to place people on the board or have any power over the board. We're a freestanding board now, and that's a major accomplishment for us. And we relocated our offices. We were at one time on Lindell Boulevard, but we have now moved to a interesting facility at Sarah and Forest Park, the CICCT building. And of course, our capacity building workshops is a major accomplishment, because we did want to be able to give more. And we felt that by giving to the organizations who are also giving, that would be a way for us to be more, as I stated earlier, impactful. We've created an intern position at the board, and that young man has done a wonderful job, Darian, with helping us become social media savvy. So we are on Facebook and LinkedIn and TikTok and all those things. So go look for us and like us, or whatever that is that you do to build our numbers. And we just elected four new board members. So that's a huge accomplishment for us. We've got more manpower to help us be able to help more people. So that's some of our accomplishments.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and just the updates and the growth and expansion. I mean, it's really exciting, and I don't know that everyone always gets a chance to hear that information. So I appreciate you bringing greetings and then sharing that with us. I have to say, I've been following you all on social media, and I mean, if you guys aren't following them, yes, if you all aren't following them, you need to. They're doing amazing work, more than I ever even imagined. Such a small group of people could do. They're small but mighty. And yes, yes. And Darian, thank you for, I want Darian and Linda to be able to say something as well. So I'll start with Linda, if there's anything you'd like to say, and then Darian as well.
Good morning. I would just like to say good morning to everyone. Welcome, and thank you guys for joining in.
Thank you, Linda. Darian, anything you'd like to say?
Good morning, everyone. I would just like to say that I'm appreciative to be here, and that I am very excited to get into the workshop and see what we all have to offer today.
And thank you, Darian. Yeah, everything you are doing is really amazing. So I am excited. Again, I just wanted to share very briefly that, Mosaic Beginnings, we are in this space because this is exactly who we serve. The services that we provide are capacity building services. Our hearts, all of us, those consultants that work with Mosaic Beginnings, are from the community and committed to our community. And so we've counted a privilege and an honor to be able to work with the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization. It's been so much fun doing these workshops and just really being a part of making sure that the infrastructure of our community organizations is even stronger. A few house rules you'll see on the screen are that we want to ensure that you have your cameras on if possible. We want this to be as engaging as it can be. We know that we're not in the same space, but as much as we can make this feel as though we are, we want to do that. This is going to be, more interactive, and we do have a little bit smaller group, or pretty much a smaller group than we usually do. And actually that's really good because it allows us to be as engaged as we need to for this topic. We know that discussing board governance isn't always the easiest, and so we want to make sure that we are engaging you. Please also feel free to use the raise your hand feature or the chat box to ask questions. I am so thankful for Mary, who is from my team, Mary Ford-Beer. She's on here and she's going to definitely be helping us with that, that aspect of it, as is Linda. Linda always does a great job of that too. So ask questions, be engaged, don't be shy. I'm going to have some time where I'm going to pause to ask if anyone has questions, but jump in even if it's not that moment. Please remain muted unless you have raised your hand. And you'll be called upon then. We just ask that because then we don't have background noise that keeps other people from being able to engage in the experience. We do have a lot to cover today, and so I just want to make sure that I mention that. So we will kind of go through some things a little bit more quickly, but I do want to share that there is a password protected site we will guide you all towards. And on that password protected site, there will be more in-depth information. So the first thing we're going to do is a pop quiz. I hope you guys are, oh, where'd the pop quiz go? Oh my God, oh, there we go. All right, pop quiz. We're gonna do this. So I have 2 questions. Tell us who you are, and then we wanna talk about the COVID-19 effect. And the way that we're going to do this is that there are 2 polls I'm gonna launch. So I'm gonna launch one poll. We're just wanting to kind of gauge who's in the room, and that is being launched now. We want to know whether you are a board member or a staff member. You should see that on your screen. And just go ahead and click that. And then we will, okay. All right, so it looks like we have a couple of board members, and then we have mostly staff members. So that's good to know, just because we want to be able to see who we're talking to, who we're speaking to, and maybe who else isn't in the room that we might want to share this information with. So we have 6 staff members and 2 board members. So you see that? All right. So I'm going to launch our second poll. Again, this just kind of will give me a little bit of information that I didn't have. And I did review everything that you all shared with me via the registration, but I wanted to ask this question too, just to gauge where we are at the beginning. And sorry, there's a misspelling, but it says our board was adequately prepared to be flexible and adjust when the pandemic started. So when that pandemic hit in March 2020, was your board prepared to be flexible and adjust? So we have some not sure, we have, okay. This is helpful. So I'm interested, I'm interested in hearing some stories. We'll have to talk about that. But okay, so I see, I'll end the poll and I'll share with you all what the results were. So it seems like the majority of organizations said, or people on here said yes, their board was able to be flexible. And so that's really encouraging because that's not something that I've heard a lot of. Is there maybe, before we move on, maybe one person want to share how your board was flexible or prepared to be flexible? I think I heard someone. Oh, Colleen. Oh,
sorry. Yeah, sure. I didn't realize I wasn't on mute, but I can share. Yeah, I think that where our board was really strong is that they had trust in the staff to know how best to respond within our program to the pandemic, and so they didn't try to like get involved in the weeds of like day-to-day operations or what we were going to do, but we're supportive of do what you need to do to still keep moving forward and support families as you have been as best as you can. With the new guidelines and everything like that. So that's why I'd say like we had enough trust built with and confidence built with our board that they were comfortable with us doing that.
That is huge. No, thank you. That speaks to a lot of the points that'll be made throughout this, is really having those established relationships with the board And then also making sure that the board's role is what it should be. It should not be in the day-to-day operations and the weeds, and that can tend to be a challenge. And I see, so thank you for that. I see Iris, please feel free to speak. I see your hand raised.
I'm a board member for Good Journey Development Foundation. We do leadership development training, and we went virtual. All of the participants who signed up for the program, if they did not have computers, were given devices. I don't know how the staff arranged that, but they did, and all the classes went virtual.
Love it. Thank you. Yeah, that was so necessary to be able to transition to that. And a lot of organizations thought they couldn't do that, you know, but we found out in the pandemic, there's a lot that can be done. So thank you. So that's, you know, wasn't too hard. That was our pop quiz, just to kind of level set and see where we are. And so these are some slides from our previous presentations I just wanted to use to level set. We wanted to look at just what's in a board. You know, we operate with the board as the backbone of our organizations. And as we're thinking about what we need from our board, because it's going to look different for every organization, we really need to ask ourselves some key questions. This is not exhaustive, but it just gives us an idea of things to think about. You know, what do we need to be successful as an organization and make a significant sustained impact? And what a significant sustained impact is going to look different for each organization. You know, we need to know what skills are needed to accomplish the goals, what types of partnerships are critical. Again, all of these are very unique to your organization and the work you're doing and the community you're serving. Personalities are really critical in determining the progress. We need to make sure that we have people who are committed and aligned with the work that we're doing and are going to encourage forward thinking and all that. If we have people that are, you know, pulling us back and not wanting to move forward, that's not necessarily a good member for our board. So we want to make sure that we are aware of that. And that being agile is essential. Being able to be flexible is really, really important. And I know all of us learned that throughout the pandemic. We at least experienced it, even if some organizations may not have taken that on. Just, you know, also we want to focus on some things that maybe is not always discussed, which is the fact that the board members and their relationship with those in the organization, it's not solely transactional. And traditionally it's been treated as such in many organizations. It's really important that you talk with your board members, really share your whys, why you're here at the table, what are your goals, what are your, you know, are there some other things you need to learn about them as a person that will help you to better understand, you know, why they're a part of this. You may find out that there are some things they bring to the table you didn't know. You may find that you all have something in common that will help you be able to work better together. It's important to just treat each other as people. It's important to operate as a team. You're not, you know, against each other. You all literally are there to support one another in this work in serving our community. It's important that board members remain informed about what's going on. And even if it's something that's not so great, they should know about it as soon as possible and know about the resolution. To the point that was made by Colleen, you know, if there's that trust there, they're going to know that the team is going to be able to handle it. And so, but we don't want to keep information hidden from them. We want to engage them with our stakeholders as well, have them in the community, seeing what's happening, because that just being present will help them to have a better understanding and even be more committed to the work. We already talked kind of about the personal relationships and establishing goals for the board. Like that should be done together. It should align with the goals of the nonprofit, but it doesn't mean they're going to be exactly the same goals. So we want to make sure that we are communicating with one another and establishing goals that are going to be realistic. And then we just provide some strategic direction, and that direction is going to be much easier to follow when we know that everybody is bought in. So that's it from our previous information that we covered. I only put this in here just because I know people are in varying levels of where their organization is. And so I just wanted to share that this is kind of the bare minimum. This is what is, I know some people answered in the registration form like, hey, I'm totally new to this. So the bare minimum is that we must have a president, a secretary, and a treasurer in order for a nonprofit to be able to operate. And so these are essential roles. And when we're starting off, when we're small, some of these roles may have to have a lot of different characteristics within them. So we might need someone to have different skill sets that they might not need otherwise. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at, again, those questions that we were considering. What do we need right now as an organization? And do people in these positions actually have the things that we need? As the organization grows, then of course there are additional positions that are added, vice president, historian, so many other and then just other board members in general, but we just make sure we want to start here and then build upon that. So when we look at the board, there is a life cycle of 3 stages. And I do have to plug, not that she is wanting me to do that, but I just want to say thank you to Linda, because this was really a collaboration where there was some wonderful information that she shared with us. And so we were able to merge that with information that we also pulled. And this is one of those things. So thank you, Linda. The board life cycle does have 3 stages. This is one of those things I said goes a lot deeper. However, in the interest of time, we've only called out some key pieces, and you will find more information on the password protected site. But there are, the first is kind of those smaller organizations. When they're first starting out, they're considered either organizing or founding boards. So they can look 2 ways. One, it can just be small. They're following the leader. Maybe one person started the organization. They've brought some people that are in their circle with them, and they're not really task oriented. They're kind of just trying to just do the work. They just want to make an impact. So they're kind of going, along as they know how, and as opportunities arise, they kind of, build off of that. Fundraising really isn't a huge focus for them. It doesn't mean there's nothing that happens, but that's kind of as an aside, that'll happen. There's not really a lot of capacity for that. And they're really just trying to operationalize and get out in the community and start doing some work. There's also an approach where there's a group of members who found the organization. When that happens, there's more of a sense of ownership because they all were a part of establishing this organization. They are very task oriented because they know exactly why they're doing this and the end goal, the end game. And so they're going to be very committed to that. And then they do have a lens towards raising funds for this organization. As the organization gets more established and grows, it transitions to this what's called a governing board. And so you start noticing that there's a need for more systems to be in place so that everything can flow more smoothly. And we have more clear definition of who are the staff, who are the board members, what are their roles. Those are now separated more. And so we have to be very clear. That's where some job descriptions come in. And, we also have some additional practices that may be in place where we're really outlining this is how we operate. And people are starting to have to follow some rules. Maybe they didn't have to before because they weren't in place. Additionally, the relationship becomes more balanced between the board and the staff. So again, with that delineation of these are board members and these are staff members, that starts to kind of shift the relationship a bit. Some people will be welcoming to it. Others, it may be a little bit of tension because they're used to operating on a different level. The board chair and executive director roles are more clearly defined, and they work in tandem with one another, but there's not as much crossover anymore with that. And then this is where committees become essential as well. We're starting to focus on different areas. So we need people who are going to be committed to doing work in different areas. So we start splitting up and having people do more deeper work than they were before, so that we can continue to propel that forward and make more of an impact. And then the staff starts to realize that they are accountable to the board. So that board is a governing body that's making decisions at a higher level, and they'll follow that. And Linda, did you have something you wanted to share as well?
Not yet, no.
Okay. So then the institutional board. So once the governing board is in place and then they're doing the work and the organization continues to become more established, we transition to what's called an institutional board. And that's probably what a lot of you are used to seeing as it pertains to some of the larger, more established organizations. That's where more of the prestigious people who are, higher up and, executives and things like that may be at the table. It's more attractive to people who are in the kind of upper echelon group. They're saying we want to be a part of this because now they have the funds, they have the connections, and they want to do something on this extremely large scale. They know that a big part of their role is raising money, whether it's them giving money themselves and they have that to give, or them utilizing their vast network to bring funding to the organization. The board becomes much more diverse as far as experiences, thoughts, backgrounds, the people that are at the table, because now they have a broader group of community members that they are providing support to, and they're also much more visible. And so we need to have more representation of what the entire community they're serving looks like. And also because this is a larger organization, there are much more nuances that need to be considered. So we need people who have experienced those things and can help carry that work forward. They also provide more financial oversight, governance becomes stronger, there's more policies in place, and then they have their own goals that they are now responsible for meeting. So we talked about the fact that the nonprofit has goals, and so does the board. They should be aligned, however, they may not look exactly the same, but they're working towards a similar end goal. This is not as clear right here, but again, this is one of those documents that's on the password protected site. I won't go through everything in the interest of time, but just overarching, I want to reiterate, the board's service is to establish organizational identity, to ensure that there are resources for the organization, whatever that looks like at whatever stage that this organization is in. Because remember, if the board is, you know, just starting out, with the smaller organization, it's going to look different than if they are an established board in the institutional phase. So they also are there to provide oversight, and you know, there's also some assessments that they should be doing for themselves, you know, to kind of look at where they are over time, which is what you'll see down here. So I want to stop and just kind of do a quick check-in. Are there any questions, any thoughts that we wanted to share before we move to the next piece, which is where we're going to talk about why nonprofit boards fail? No?
I would just share that for those who like to do research and read like I do, that
Mhm.
Board Source is a wonderful information source for nonprofits and for your boards. They have a lot of free documents on their website. Some of them are only available to organizations that are members of Board Source, but there are a lot of documents on that website in case you're interested in looking at some of the documents that Monique just shared.
Agreed. And I know on some of the slides we do have the sources, some we didn't, but we definitely will make sure those are available. But Board Source definitely was like infused throughout all of this. And there are some of those documents on the password protected site. And so thank you, Linda, for those, because they're pretty powerful. So if you guys want to make sure you're successful, those are the documents to look at. So we'll go ahead and jump into why nonprofit boards fail. And I just want to make sure I say this is not an exhaustive list at all, and not all of this happens in every situation. So there are times when, you know, the board loses sight of the mission, or maybe they're not even really clear on what it is all the way. Sometimes things change and no one has really discussed, you know, what our work is really, it looks like right now. So everybody's got their own vision and they're operating from that. So we want to make sure that we hone in and focus on that. Sometimes adapting to change is really, really difficult. People have been there for a long time. This is how we've done it. It's worked. Why are we trying to change now? You know, sometimes they're unrealistic and unclear expectations. So unrealistic can be that we're expecting things to happen that just can't, simply because of whether it's financially where we are, whatever else is going on in our community, all of those different things, what's going on within the organization. We really need to make sure that expectations are realistic. One that comes to mind, just that I run into when doing some, you know, grant writing and other things like that for organizations, is that the board oftentimes, like, we want to go after the money, without realizing that maybe the programming needs to be strengthened, especially in a space now where we're looking at, is there a racial equity lens infused throughout the organization, whether it's policies, programs, the board, otherwise. They're wanting that. That means that takes time to build that information in. Are we showing that we are really committed to the social determinants of health and making sure people have access to things? If that's not there, we need to make sure that we are telling that story. Otherwise, we're going after funding and we're not getting it because all we're doing is chasing the funding and not making sure we're prepared. So that happens a lot with boards. They rightfully so want to get more money in the door, but they don't understand what it takes to get there from a programmatic standpoint. And then, and also being unclear. And unclear can come from the nonprofit as well. So not being clear about what the expectations are of the board. So the board is only operating in the way that they know how, based on maybe their previous experience as board members in other capacities, or in their own experience in their careers. So we really want to make sure we have clear expectations. A lot of times, especially with smaller organizations that are just starting, they're choosing their family and friends. They're invested because it's someone they know, so they want to support them, but they don't have the skill set. And so it's really important for us to be intentional, even when we're choosing our family and friends, that we choose people who do have the background to be able to support us, because that's where a lot of nonprofits fail. They don't end up having the support and the commitment or the know-how. And again, that goes also into like just the skills. That's something that a lot of times people don't think about. They look at, oh, you're a corporate person. Maybe we should, you know, utilize you, but maybe they don't have the right heart for the work. Maybe they're not aligned, as we said, with their why. We need to make sure that we're meeting your unique organizational needs. And as Linda said in the chat, all money isn't good money. You know, people often are chasing grants, and like she said, she calls it mission creep. I like that. You know, we end up steering away from our mission. Now, it doesn't mean we can't bring in another layer to the work that we're doing, but we should not constantly be changing, because then no one knows what you actually stand for. You don't know anymore, and it just creates chaos. So always stand on what you believe in, why you started the organization, or why it was started if you didn't start it, and focus on identifying the funding. We can pass up funding, and sometimes that's the best thing to do to make sure we're serving our community. One thing I want to make sure I discuss, and I will do that quickly, is that there are some governance pitfalls. Very quickly, there's some where board members rely a lot on the staff to give them information about the organization instead of doing the work themselves. They may come from a corporate background, and so they don't know as much. They bring some great skills to the table that are necessary, but they don't understand the organization. Well, that bogs down the staff, keeps them from being able to do their work. So we want board members that are willing to go out and identify that information for themselves, make sure that they bring something to the table, some knowledge. They need to do that legwork. There are some that come from a corporate realm, and so they may not understand how nonprofits function, and they bring a corporate lens to it, and so they think there's something wrong, but it's really that they just are misaligned with the way that nonprofits operate. And so it's important that they focused on that. They also can impede the director's, ability to be effective. And so it can either be by being too involved in the weeds, as we were talking about before, and the day-to-day operations, and not allowing that executive to operate in a way that they know how to and for which they were hired. But also it can be having unrealistic expectations. So setting the bar so high when we're really not there yet. And that just leads to burnout. It leads to continuous disappointment, and it's just not effective for anyone. So best practices as it pertains to nonprofit board governance. Here are 5 of them. Again, not an exhaustive list, but it's really important to align strategies, goals, and capacity. Their goals should really be linked to your mission. That's important, and we really need to think about that. Before we move forward, it's important to think about what is our mission and what are all the strategies, goals, and the capacity that we want to connect to it. And capacity can be a variety of things, from do we have the number of team members we need? Do we have the skills at the table that we need to accomplish these goals and these strategies? If not, what do we need to pull in? If it's, whether it's staff, or as we're talking about here, staff to support the board, or do we have the board members that we need? If we don't, then that helps us decide who we need to start looking for to add to the board. As the St. Louis Philanthropic organization was saying, they added 4 new board members. Well, I'm sure they looked at who do we already have at the table, what's missing, and how can we be a stronger board? That's what we all should be doing. When we're building the board effectively, that means that we are, doing some of what I just mentioned, but we're also making sure that we are, being diligent about, developing and maintaining, a diverse board. So while we do want the board to be representative of the community that we're serving, we know that there is value in diversity of thought. And we want to make sure that we are including people who may not think like us, that may have some different experiences than we do. But even though the majority of the board should be representative of the community, and that's something we'll talk about. They should have a diverse range of backgrounds. So we don't want everybody who's been a nonprofit for their entire lives. We need people who have the legal background. We need people who have business backgrounds. There's just different lenses that will really benefit nonprofits, because nonprofits do operate in a way where they're helping organization. They may not always be thinking about some of these other critical components that the board members that come with different expertise will help us do. Define how the board's going to work. It's really important to be clear about that up front, so that everyone knows, are they a working board? Are they just providing oversight and governance? What types of tools do they need to really be able to do their work? Being really intentional about that is going to be essential. And they must be able to create and integrate different sets of values, and being able to also, implement some practices that they know are going to be essential for them to operate effectively. It's also important for them to have self-assessments built in, so they can kind of look at, what are we doing at this point in time? Are we being effective? Are we doing what we thought we were going to do or said we were going to do? Do we need to kind of change direction or go deeper in an area? That should be an ongoing process, and you determine if that's something that's, quarterly, biannually, annually, whatever that is, that assessment needs to be occurring. People learn new skills all the time. The needs of the organization change. We need to make sure that people know how to operate with that. And we also want to provide, appropriate oversight. Again, not in the weeds. Let's look at what appropriate oversight looks like for your organization, and promote accountability and engagement. We spoke earlier about the board members getting out and really seeing the work happen. so they can be engaged. We want to hold board members accountable for pulling their weight. That's super important. We want to make sure that they have different job descriptions as well. So that'll help them be accountable. If they know exactly what is expected of them, then they can be held to that. And that's how we can measure whether this is really effective. Also make sure that you use technology. I just put that little asterisk there because that's going to help us be more effective in communicating in between board meetings. If there's something important we need to share, we also should be offering training to our board members so they can continue to grow and be able to serve. Just a little bit more and then we'll pause for a check-in again, is that we want to, oh, I'm sorry, I want to stop here. It says beyond the bylaws, this is from Tom, do you have examples of documents a board can use to outline how the board will work? We can put some of those on the password protected site for sure, to make sure that you guys have that. So I'm going to ask Mary if you don't mind documenting that we're going to need to have examples of how the board will work. And so what should be in place? These are, and I think I'm going to pull up actually a different screen because this is very small, but it shows this exact same thing. So I hope everyone can see this. But basically what we are looking at here, and again, I'm not going to read through all of it. This is on the password protected site, but there are things that are in place. Articles of incorporation, when you're starting the nonprofit, that's important. It's not really a lot that needs to be changed there. It's kind of pretty standard. It's a legal document that guides the work you do. Then there are the bylaws, and those rules, are written to establish the governance structure of a nonprofit. However, I do want to say that that's something that needs to be, revisited every few years because things change. So we can't operate off of something from 20 years ago when we know that what we're doing now and what our community looks like is very, very different. And there are organizations that do operate that way, and that's just not effective at all in so many capacities. We also need to make sure that there are policies in place. Some of them apply to the organization. There are things like, whistleblowers, like how are we protecting people who are saying they're seeing something that's not good that's happening. We also need to have policies on whether we're able to accept gifts. If we are, what are they? Or all of that, making sure that the personnel policies are in place. And just recognizing that everything that happens up here with the governing body impacts and trickles down to the day-to-day operations. And so we want to look at that across the board. No pun intended. We want to look at that across the board and make sure that everything we have in place makes sense. And again, that's something we need to continue to revisit because things change all the time. And when we're talking about equitable efforts, this is where we need to make sure that these remain equitable for all people. And so that's where we need various lenses at the table at our board. And so when we talk about racial equity, we talk about people representing our community. The community is going to look different. So if we're serving a community that has a lot of disabilities, we need people who are who have experienced those disabilities. We also need people who are caregivers of people with those disabilities at the table making decisions. So that's what I mean by making sure there's representation at that board level. You don't know what you don't know. And so including that community voice, especially in an agile or flexible board approach, is going to be essential. We also need something that outlines the board processes, and it's kind of like everyone knows this is how we operate. There are other documents on this side that say, meeting minutes, IRS Form 990. These are things that the board needs to help them with their decisions and activities. And so I'm going to go on back to the presentation. Let me know if it doesn't easily show up. But that's that piece. So I want to also just one more thing, and then we'll take a pause. Talk about the theory of change very quickly. It's well outlined here that these are all things that need to happen. Organizations are at different stages, and so that also impacts the board. So even when we have an institutional board, that, where it's an established organization, all of that, the organization is constantly changing. When we think about the pandemic, which is the lens that we're using for all of this work, we're thinking about how this organization may have changed throughout the pandemic. And so we need to be really intentional as we think about that. And so that means that the board is going to need to look at, again, where we are. This is cyclical. So it means that at any point in time, we can switch. At any point in time, we're going to need to say, hey, now there's a different program we need to consider. Now we're having to look at impact a little bit differently than we did because our policies had to change as a result of COVID-19. So as a board, let's come back and look at what are we holding the nonprofit accountable for, and is that still realistic? So with that, I want to definitely pause again and see if there's anything else here. I see that Linda said that the strategic plan can outline this, the descriptions of roles and responsibilities. She also shared that there is a book, Governance as Leadership, which is a good resource. And then, again, Board Source is a good resource. Is there anything else? That's a lot of information that we just covered. Anything need clarification? Anything you all want to share your thoughts on? No? Are we good to go? Okay, I'll keep moving. If you guys see someone's hand raised or someone trying to talk and I don't see, please just let me know. Don't worry about stopping me at all. So I just want to quickly talk about racial equity. Some things I talk about consistently, no matter what the topic is. And I'm intentional about that because really this is something that crosses over every aspect of an organization. Over the years, there's been a lot of talk about racial equity or diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, it's been one conversation or one training, and then it's just left there as though people understand the importance of it and then are going to infuse it into their work, and that doesn't happen. And so what we want to do is be intentional about calling it out in every space and saying what it looks like. So it looks different when we're talking about developing grant proposals or managing grants. It looks different when we're talking about managing funding and things like that, or putting the different pieces in place to be a sustainable organization where we're talking about all the policies and everything. And it looks different when we're talking about a board. So racial equity, again, it's an outcome, but it's also a process. We want to make sure that we are infusing it in every aspect. The focus that we're looking at right now is this one where it talks about representation at all levels, including executive leadership and the board. So that means, again, we need people that look like the community that's being served, that are from the community being served. And that needs to happen because when decisions are being made with people who don't know anything about the community, that has a trickle down effect as is shown here. So when we look at this, these organizational practices, the policies, the priorities, procedures, best practices, those are all governed and impacted by the decisions that the board is making. So they're not in the day-to-day, but they still impact it because everything that happens here trickles down to the attitudes and the behaviors within the organization. It determines the types of training and education and programming that we have and how that's impacted. Are we really looking at this with a lens that considers the people that we are serving at all, across the board? So that's why we have to make sure that at the top, we have the right people in place. And honestly, in an agile approach, the board is not really that hierarchy that we're used to. A traditional model is the board has these executive level people, they make these decisions and that's it. With this more agile approach, there's still those executive level people at the board level. However, there are also staff members that are invited to be a part of that. And if you think about it, those are the people in here doing this work firsthand, seeing it on the ground. When they're invited to that board level, then we start hearing more about the things that we may not be considering when we're making decisions for the organization. Their voices are important. We need to have them there. Maybe we're serving youth with our organization. We should have youth representation at the board level. We don't just tell them what to do because we don't know. We're not youth. We don't know what they know. We don't know what they're thinking, and we don't know what they need from us. And so it's important that we really consider that from an agile perspective. If we're going to be as impactful as possible as a board, we have all of these different lenses at the table. This is something that I recently found and I just fell in love with it because this is, it's a certification focused on making sure that there's Black equity infused in all aspects of the organization. And again, the reason I'm talking about all of this is because this impacts everything. Funders are requiring this. So we can't really afford to any longer say, well, we don't need to talk about this, or we can't think that just because we've had training, that's gonna get it. That's not going to cut it. Now they're wanting you to intentionally tell them how you've incorporated that into every aspect. Otherwise, you're not going to be competitive, and oftentimes your organization won't even be considered for funding. So on this page, I just look here where we're talking about the board. They're saying again that the board, okay, hold on. I'm getting excited here. Okay. The board actually should, and the senior management, as well as middle management, everyone throughout the organization should represent the community to serve. This case, it's the Black organization, the Black community, but there are other certifications and other expectations for a variety of communities. So I just wanted to call that out because they're literally looking at this from all levels and all aspects. Social determinants of health, I always like to bring that up. We won't dive deep into it, but the basis of it is that people have different levels of access to what they need, whether it's healthcare, food, transportation, education, all of that. And so when we are looking at our board, we want to make sure that, and they're putting policies in place, they need to be considering everyone, because our staff have different levels of access. We need to make sure that anything that the board is calling the organization to follow considers all of those people, and that we work with, and as well as the people that we serve. And that's why, again, those voices need to be at that decision-making table. I want to go ahead and pause for a check-in. Again, anything that you all are thinking of now that we're kind of adding some other layers here?
You know, the only thing I would add is, as we're talking about racial equity, although a lot of the conversations you hear speak of African Americans or Blacks when they talk about racial equity, it also includes all people of color. So
Yes.
the Latinx, you know, Hispanic, Asian, etc. And so I just want to make sure people keep in mind that racial equity includes all people of color.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're so correct. And that's why, you know, this is, the example provided was one, but you're correct. There's so many other things we need to consider when we are thinking about the other community members that we're serving. And whatever that focus is, that, you know, whichever ethnicity and racial background we're serving, we need to be intentional about making sure that we're not just having people there as tokens. We're not just saying something that sounds good. We're really looking at what matters culturally, and we're making sure that we are bringing in the right partnerships. That's a big part of it too. It shouldn't be that, you know, it shouldn't be that we are working with organizations that don't understand the community, and also that are not respected by that community, that have caused hurt and harm. So it is going to look different for each of those different communities and the entities that are there to serve. So I appreciate that lens a lot. Is there anything else in this piece? Okay. So we're going to talk about the agile board characteristics and then how to make that shift to get there. So we've done a little bit of talking about that. We're going to go a little bit deeper. I'm just going to break some things down because some of it is a little, you know, how wordy things can be. And so I want to make sure that when we're talking about it, I just kind of break down what it actually means. So there's something called foresight governance when we're thinking about an agile board. And this is where, you know, so I see what it says here, you guys can read, but I wanted to just give the overall, which means that we are actually looking at the future. Foresight, you know, we're looking ahead, we're seeing what the trends are showing. So even if our community is in a certain space, but we know we're moving in a different direction, it's important to look and see what other communities are doing that are where we are headed. That way we are starting to look at how they've made an impact, maybe even some mistakes that they've made that we want to avoid, and we can start putting some plans in place. Being able to look at those trends really affects how our organization is able to operate. It also looks, so the good thing about foresight is that it looks at disruption as actually something that can be positive. A lot of times people look at it as a negative, and of course there are some challenges, but there are positives that come. Sometimes when we're disrupted, we're caused to do something different that we wouldn't have done that's going to be beneficial to our organization. And so having a board that sees disruption as an opportunity to make a significant impact and to kind of shift in a direction that's going to be much more beneficial is helpful. You know, it's really good to start looking at what does it mean if we do this? There are some unknown things. Let's call those out. And then once we do that, let's start thinking about some things that can maybe support those unknowns. Constantly planning ahead. I mean, we've been through unprecedented times. We're going to go through more. We don't know what those are going to be, but if we have a board that's focused on saying, hey, we're going to continue to think about the unknown, and we're going to continue to think about how to serve in that capacity, then we're not so reactive. Sometimes we have to be reactive, but we can be more responsive to what we know is coming and kind of forecast some of what we may need as a result of that, whether it's finances, whether it's different partners, whether we need to consider different resources that we haven't yet, and start thinking about how we would access those should a situation arise that we've not faced yet. It's also, you know, important to put a framework in place. So that's the good thing, is that if we, you know, look at all of these things, we can start putting frameworks in place. What frameworks do is that they help us to be able to have some sort of structure and guide as to where we would need to go, but it still allows that flexibility that, you know, when it happens, we don't know all of the details. So we can still utilize those details and kind of move as we need to, but we at least have something that's an overarching guide that moves us in the right direction. We also want to make sure that we're continuing to like scan the landscape, see what's going on in our local community, at the national level, and just in other communities that are similar to ours, across the country. So when I say national, it may be just something overarching and broad that's happening, you know, national level, federal level, and those things can eventually impact us at the state and local levels. So keeping an eye to that. But then also when we're looking across the country, there are similar communities to ours. We need to be looking at that. We need to continuously have a new vision. And not that we're just all over the place. We stick with what we stand for, but we need to have new visions, innovations that we're putting in place so we can continue to evolve as well. The other part is operational agility. So when we have the pieces that I've mentioned, we also need to couple that with making sure that we have clear projects that are innovative, that are constantly happening. Again, innovation is important. Oftentimes organizations remain very static and stagnant, and that is not effective when we're trying to make sure that we are ahead of the game and we're able to operate in uncertain times. We need a board that is flexible and that has people that want to bring new ideas, you know, they're staying on top of the research and this, you know, what the science is saying, and all of the best practices that are out there, so that we can then look at how we can apply that to our organization and use it to be able to improve our infrastructure, but also improve the way we serve our community. We want the processes. We talked about the processes, the procedures, the policies, and all of that, but we want to make sure that within those, we've built in the opportunity to kind of scale, which means to grow and to evolve. We don't want it to just be that this is what our policy says and that's what we stick to. We need to have a plan in place with the policy. Every few years, every however many months or whatever it is, we're going to be looking at our policies and say, hey, you know, as new ideas come or as new things change, we want to make sure we have this piece in place where we've got a space for people to be able to scale the work that they're doing. And so but we've got to be intentional. If we're not calling it out, it's easy to overlook that because we're doing the day-to-day work. So that's why we want to call it out at the board level and then expect that the nonprofit is going to trickle that down to the people doing the work. We definitely, evaluation, I always say, is super key. We want to make sure we have metrics for everything. It doesn't have to be cumbersome. What we do want to know is what we're doing working. Are there things that we need to change that we haven't, you know, recognized? We want to make sure that we're, you know, assessing risk and opportunity. Sometimes it's worth taking a risk because the benefit outweighs the risk. And it's like, if it's beneficial, then it can have really, really great impact. At the same time, if there's a risk, maybe it's not that big of a deal. Like maybe it didn't work out, but it's not going to hurt us. It helps more if we try. We need people that are in place to kind of manage that and decide which of those risks we should take and which we shouldn't. And there should be a portfolio of work. So it should be a diverse group of information, of opportunities that we are communicating with a team about to determine what we should go after and when we should go after it. And again, it's going to depend on where we are in the life cycle. So everything is contingent upon what is going on in the organization, in the community surrounding us, at the national level, at the local level. We have to look at all of that and what the organization's readiness is as well. We want to make sure that in this approach, decision-making is responsive and agile. Remember, we talked about all the people that are at the table. This is not your traditional approach. We've got all voices at the table from all levels, and they are part of the decision-making team. They are responsive to the issues that have been brought up. They're responsive to future needs and starting to put things in place, even if it hasn't happened yet, because that's that proactive piece. We don't want to just wait, because that allows us, when things happen, to be able to move more quickly and then pursue the opportunities, access the resources and all of that we need. There's something called, so once we have those two pieces in place, once we have the operational agility as well as the foresight governance in place, and we're like, yes, our organization is fully ready to move forward in an agile way, we can then look at what's called strategic optionality. At the basics, what this means is that we are able to make a decision that increases future choices. So traditionally, there's a decision being made, as you see here with Path B, where it's very limited. You have this option or you have that one, and that's it. Well, then what if something else comes up that we've never expected? You know, where do we get all of those different thoughts and opportunities, and where do we start thinking outside of the box and being creative? Because we're not monolithic. You know, we are ever changing and evolving. We have so many dynamics that are tied to not only us as people, but our organizations and our community. So when there's high uncertainty, as we've experienced over these last couple of years, we need a much wider range of flexibility. We need to try to do something we've never done before and see what happens. And so that's what Path A would allow. It allows for us to continue to have more and more thoughts, more and more opportunities connect with maybe different partners that are non-traditional for us, but may present a new opportunity to serve our community. So that's what it is at the basic level. And it's really, really important that organizations move in that direction as soon as possible. Oh, and I see that I didn't see this, but I know Linda had shared that foresight governance really supports an organization's adaptive capacity to proactively respond to changes, emerging needs, those that are planned, because we want to plan as much as possible, but also, as we shared, those that are unexpected. That's going to happen. Now that we've been through it, we can't say that we don't know that things that are unexpected can happen. So we want to operate accordingly. Yeah. So with strategic optionality, there are 8 steps, and I want to make sure that I am, I'm just going to, as you see here, I'm just going to go through those. I'm not going to go through them in the level of detail I wanted, but we will have that information on the password protected site, because I do want to kind of do a couple of interactive things. But we really want to identify the starting point. Where are we financially? What kind of pieces do we already have in place? And then we want to make sure that we have what's called authentic optimism. We want to blend hope with realism. We're not saying that we don't want to be realistic, but let's kind of dream a little bit, because when we dream, then other opportunities and possibilities come out that we may not have considered. We inspire our staff and our stakeholders. There's that empowerment where they're not just being asked to think inside of a box. And when they do have that space to think more creatively, then they're flexible and they're like, okay, wait, I've thought about this before. Maybe it's something we can put on the table and see if it works. And that helps us diversify our funding opportunities and our resources. We want to immediately look at, what we have in place, and then we want to be able to start allocating funding potentially in a different way. So when it's an agile cadence, that means that instead of us having these buckets that we tend to have in the budget that are very stringent, we start saying, well, yeah, we still want structure, but maybe we don't have to be as stringent, and we can use some of this funding from this bucket to also help us get to this place now that we see that there's a new need. I know at the start of the pandemic, I remember working with an organization, and they had, fee for service, which a lot of organizations have. Well, right now, there weren't enough people being serviced in that capacity. And so we wrote to their funders and said, hey, do you mind, looking at what we typically do and providing us that funding, releasing that funding now so that we can help people. It might be in a little bit of a different way, but it's the same population and it's going to still, meet our end goals. That was essential. And so being able to adjust and not just be as stringent was really, really helpful and necessary. And then we also want to accelerate capturing more sector data. So looking at all of the different nuances that maybe we weren't looking at the zip code level data. Are we serving people in certain zip codes? And do we intend to serve them in those zip codes? Are we serving, do we intend to serve moms who are really serving more dads or aunts or grandmas? And then that gives us a better picture, and then may shift like the support that we're providing. Because if it's grandma who is now taking care of a young child for whichever reason, then maybe there are additional needs and supports that need to be in place. So it just gives us more data to provide better service. And when this talks about exploring opportunities to buy growth, it's not necessarily fully about money. It may result in more funding being available, but it's really about looking at, again, those partnerships and what are some other opportunities for us to say, hey, they're doing something we're not doing, but it's going to serve our community better. Together, we're able to do something exceptional that we wouldn't have been able to do. And so that's where you are growing and evolving as an organization. And then also, again, staying positive and being flexible. It's really hard. We've got negative, people in the room. And what we're really needing to do is adapt to change. So having a board that is positive and really believes in the work you're doing, serving the community you're serving, and believes in thinking outside of the box. And if maybe one person that's just not who they are, and that's okay, but they're open to other people thinking differently, setting that culture and that stage for that is going to be essential so that we can continue to evolve and not just remain stagnant. This is one more piece that I thought was really important for us to cover, and that is the decision-making matrix for board actions. And so, again, not going to go into all the details. There's more information that can be shared, but oftentimes we get stuck when it's time to make decisions. And we get stuck because there's just so much information coming at us, or we get stuck on things that we're really, really passionate about. And we have to see, even if we're passionate about it, does it really fit here? Is this the time for it? Or are there other things? What are the actual things we need to focus on so that we can make important decisions and move more quickly? When it's agile, we're making sure that we are getting the decision-making into the right hands. So sometimes where we get caught up is that we have the wrong people in place. Not that they're not great people, but they're not the people doing the work. And so they're not able to understand, let's say I'm an attorney I may not understand why why a social worker is needing to take a certain approach to the work that they're doing, because that's just not where I operate from. That's not my lens. But if I can listen to this social worker who is working with the community members on a daily basis and working with other organizations and hear what some of the challenges are, hear what they're saying they need to be able to support them in doing the work better, then I now that may not be my area of expertise, but I can now make a more informed decision that's going to support the work better. And so the area we want to be in is this over here, where we have cross-cutting decisions that are working across different organizational boundaries, meaning different departments, different roles, all of that, and again, they should be at that board table. We want to make sure we're delegating decisions. Sometimes people are so caught up in having their own personal power that they don't realize they're even limiting their power. Sometimes power means letting go. Power means, shifting to other people who may know more than you do in that specific area. So we want to stay in this side of things where things aren't constantly happening to us and tripping us up and causing us to not be able to move forward, which happens a lot over here. And so with that, I definitely want to quickly just say the impact of what it means to have a board like this that is operating in an agile way. It maximizes the amount of work that is, able to be done, because we're not doing things that are redundant. We're not constantly stopping and starting. We're not holding things up. So we're able to make even more of an impact simply by getting out of our own way and letting people who know how to do the work do it. We have people at the table that are communicating with the board that can then take that work back to the day-to-day and make things happen. So that's really essential. The board also empowering that CEO, that executive director, to really be the leader. We talked about trust. Trust them to do what they were hired to do. Trust them to have the right heart. And, not that you're not providing oversight and making sure, because we know things happen. And sometimes not everyone has the best interest, but let's try and trust that person to lead their organization. And let's not impede them by the board being the ones to make all these decisions. Let's allow them to operate as they need to. And also trusting those staff members. I think a lot of times I know in the traditional model, staff members aren't quite as valued, and they're kind of just seen as people you can just move from space to space, and we're not recognizing the value they bring. No matter what their role in the organization, there is value. And ensuring that you have a board that values every single person is going to be essential. We can't operate anymore from this elitist standpoint. We've got to value the people that we have at the table. This leads us to one of the final pieces, which is the governance redesign and opening the door to opportunities. We've now gone through this pandemic. We want to reflect on what that looks like. That's going to be you going back to your organizations, talk to your board members. Remember, we're talking about relationships. Maybe there's some relationship building that needs to happen and some conversations we need to have that, describe this is what the pandemic looked like for us. Maybe it was kind of chaotic, or maybe it was like, wow, things were really great. You trusted us. And that builds, a sense of even stronger community where you can move forward. But let's start talking about that. And let's talk about, are we going to offer more remote possibilities for working? Are we going to have more virtual, training options? Are we going to make sure things are more flexible for families so that they can operate the way they need to? We've learned so much during this time. Let's talk about how we're going to keep that and move it forward, and how we're going to make it even better. Let's discuss, is there a plan to go back to the way things were? And if so, why? And then what is that going to look like? Because we do want to look at the fact that if a board makes that decision, retention is going to be very challenging. We already are seeing how hard that is. We need the board to be open to looking at all of the opportunities that exist if we do something different. We're not losing anything, we're gaining a lot. That's with that. And then, I guess I have this in here twice. But then, just overall, good governance is inclusive, participatory, consensus-oriented, responsive, transparent. We're held accountable. We are efficient because we've got the things in place so we can move effectively. We're following the rule of law. We have these things in place that are guiding us, but we also are inclusive of many different ideas and different experiences. That's how we can operate the best. I now want to pause. We're going to do a review in a scenario, but I want to pause and see if there are any thoughts, questions, anything that you guys would like to share. No, everybody's just kind of taking it in. Okay, I had to pull this up so I could look at everybody. Okay, so really quick, so we're going to do a couple of just really interactive things. We're getting towards the end of our time together. And so I wanted to just kind of go back through some of what we have just learned. So what we're going to do, I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. Well, let's go to my next slide first. So we're going to do a review. So what we're going to do here is there's a thing called Jamboard. I'm going to drop a link into the chat. You're going to click this link and I will show you all how it works. But you're going to click this link and it's kind of like you have a sticky note. There's going to be 2 different questions. On one page is going to ask a question. You're going to just type in there what you think. And there's, I don't want to say there's no right or wrong answer, but, I think it's really not like this isn't a test. It's just, hey, what do we remember from this? So I am going to go ahead and stop sharing for a moment so I can put that Jamboard link in here, and then I'll pull that up so you all can see it and it's not, confusing as to what I'm telling you to you'll be doing. So here we go in the chat. I'm putting the link in, I believe. Okay. So here is, okay, everyone should have the link in the chat now. I am going to share my screen. And so, let's see. You all will see this pop up on your screen. And so the question here is, name some things that are essential for a board to be successful. So we talked about a lot of things. We talked about different things and supports that need to be in place for a board to be successful. What you would do is you're going to go over here and you see where this says sticky note. You're going to click that sticky note. It's going to pop up and you can type whatever it is you want. You save it. This is just a little example. You save it and then it's going to pop up there. So just type one thing that you think is essential for a board to be successful. I kind of want to give examples, but I'm not. And please feel free to come off mute if you have any challenges with that. So again, the sticky note is over here. You're going to click that and it'll pop. Shared goals, passion for the mission of the organization, agility. Yeah. Yes, these are wonderful. Share goals, okay. Clarity of role and organization mission. Definitely need that. Focused on the mission. Okay. And I think, I want to make sure I didn't miss anyone. I don't think so. Okay, and then some, other things we want to make sure is that they have, partnerships. Yes, I agree. Partnerships are important. We want to make sure we have some policies in place, some procedures of neutrality. That's important too. Yes, we want to make sure, it's good to have our own individual thoughts too that bring our experiences to the table, but also making sure that at the end of the day, we're here to serve the people we're there for. Diverse backgrounds, expertise, and skills. Yes. We also talked about things like job descriptions so people understand what their roles are. Just clear expectations and everything like that. So we have one more question that I want to make sure we look at. I think I already went to it. Okay. Oh. So what's just something different about agile boards versus traditional boards? We just talked a little bit about it, but what are some differences that you see in how the board traditionally operates and how what we're talking about might kind of look a little bit non-traditional, as it should. I want to remind you the sticky notes are over here. You guys having any trouble with it?
Yeah, I think, I don't know how to get to I missed how we get to the what's different. I'm still showing in the name some things that are essential. Like that's the board I'm still on.
Oh, okay. Let me, hold on.
I can't type on this.
Oh, here we go. Hold on. Maybe I need to drop this other link in here. My apologies. Let's go ahead and here you go. There we go. Did that show up for you all in the chat?
It showed up in the chat, and when I click on it, it says I need access.
Yeah, mine said access denied.
Oh, okay. It says people with that should be able to edit. Okay, well, then I guess in the interest of time, we can, oh, here we go. I'm sorry. Okay, got it. Done. Okay. So now try it. You guys should be good. Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. Technology is our friend when it's working well, or when the user knows how to work it.
It unfortunately often does just what you tell it to and nothing more. So
I know, right? Like, couldn't it read my mind? Goodness.
be much better. All right, thank you. Yeah, I have it now.
Yeah, so yes, the question is like, what do you all think are some differences between the traditional role of a board and the agile board? And then remember, the sticky notes are over here. So there's one. Okay, more future. Oh, I like that. More future foresight focus. How you govern them, the rules and environment may be different, very much so. It's much more inclusive and respectful of different thoughts and experiences. Maybe we'll just look for maybe one more, and then we'll go ahead and do our scenario. Let's see. If Agile focuses more on strategic and generative or brainstorming, it focuses on more risk takers, that's true. And it's not as focused on fiduciary tasks. So yes, like while that is a part of it, and there is a part of it where they're focusing on the financial aspect of it and what that looks like, are we making sure that they're looking at, are we using the funds in different ways than we maybe traditionally would use the funds? So, and looking at how we can be more effective with what we have instead of trying to always create, something new or, creating more work. Racial equity is definitely something that is infused in this work and not necessarily in the traditional model. It wasn't something that was always considered.
Okay, so can I help you?
Hi, yes, good morning. My name
Oh,
is.
can we mute? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, hold on, okay, there we go, thank you. Okay, so then also, yes, tech savvy. I mean, definitely that's something huge that is needed in this agile world, is really having people who are able to utilize technology for communication among the board, as well as communication from the board. And thank you, Katie. Okay, so that is the end of that piece, and we're nearing the end. I had a scenario where I wanted to actually engage you all, but before we do that, is there anything anyone wanted to say or share? And the scenario will be brief. It'll be more just like, what are some things you guys think based on what we talked about should be considered? Okay, I guess there's not anything, so we'll go from there. Just jump in if you do think of something. So, okay, so I'll read the scenario real quick. Brenda, and it's not an all-inclusive, so there might be some gaps and you guys can call that out for sure. Brenda just took over as executive director of an established nonprofit organization that really struggled throughout the pandemic, but they were able to withstand challenging times. So they weren't necessarily thriving, but they withstood them. Many of the board members of this organization have been there for quite some time. It's located in an urban neighborhood where the majority of community members served are African American. However, the majority of the board is Caucasian. Now, I was intentional about choosing this because of a couple of organizations I've worked with where this is the situation, and I've heard of some of the challenges. So I just want to make sure I put that caveat in there. Many of the people who are on the board did grow up in that neighborhood, but it was very different 20 years ago. So this shows you they are invested in the community. They're just maybe using a lens from a different time point. They've since moved to other communities, though they still come back to this community to serve. The board members are very invested in the organization and even focus on some of the day-to-day operations where they tend to give input about how they think things should go. This has caused multiple challenges for Brenda and many of her staff. During the pandemic, many issues were highlighted and exacerbated, resulting in staff who had been with the organizations many years being removed. So there were issues within the staffing team that were identified, because now it's like, you know, rubber meets the road, we got to get things going, who's really on top of their stuff. That was highlighted. So now they started having to remove some staff members. Brenda's committed to, because Brenda was committed to making sure that she operated with integrity and righted any wrongs and ensured that the organization was thriving and growing, she had to remove those people. So knowing what we have just discussed during our time together, what are some things you notice aren't the best for the organization and community served, and why? What stage would you say this organization is in and the direction they need to move towards, as well as some critical next steps that need to be put in place? So when we're thinking about this from the board standpoint, as well as, you know, just, I think we see some crossover here with things that we said maybe weren't the best. And you guys can unmute and share anything that you would like. Or else I'm gonna call on people and ask questions.
Yes, it's Darian speaking. But I believe, just like you stated before, that you have to have individuals of the community or that are of the ethnic region of the community that you're serving in the board and in the staff. So on all levels of the organization, that way you can have that input and that insight. And I feel that this is one of the elements that's lacking in this scenario.
Definitely, no, I appreciate that. And I definitely want to say, you know, I don't know if I've said this, but while we, you know, we want to make sure that you're absolutely correct. We want to make sure that they are representative from an ethnicity standpoint. We also want to make sure that we're not solely focused on, and I should have said this earlier, we're not solely focused on their ethnicity, because we can be of the same ethnicity and still not have that lived experience and not be from that community. So we want to make sure we have both at the table. And so I wanted to make sure I clarified what I stood on with that. What else are we seeing here? There's some
So this is Colleen. I'd say one of the things I see in there is where it says that many of the board members have been there for quite some time. So it could be that if they haven't looked at their bylaws, or if they have term limits or maybe aren't following them. So like what we talked about earlier about the importance of, like, you have to have bylaws and charters, and you also have to look at them and make sure that they're still appropriate for where your organization is right now.
I love that. I love that. Yes, you're absolutely correct. Are they still like, hey, this is how we've always done it, this is what we need to do, we're good? Are they looking at, you know, some people can be there for 20 years and then have a lens where they're continuously evolving. So that's great. You know, I don't know if that's the majority, but there are some people there. So we do need to be intentional about making sure that that's the case. Do we have maybe one more person that might want to say something? Yes, Darian, I see your hand is raised. I feel like a teacher. I see your hand is raised.
Yes, I would like to add one more thing as well. Also making sure to have the community being up to date with the technological aspects, the technological developments in the community, and just the community development as a whole. So since they've been there for a long time and they were there and it was a different era when they were in the neighborhood, even though they come back, it's easy to still be disconnected from the reality that is current. So making sure that they're up to date with the current reality, not just technologically, but community-wise as well.
That is so important. And that, you know, that really, thank you for saying that. That gets at what we were talking about, where our board members need to be engaged. They should be at different events. They should be, if it's only just to observe and just see what things look like in reality. We can hear reports. When you're right there with people, there's a totally different feel and understanding that comes with that. Start talking to people that are in the community that are being served, and, you know, really have that relationship. We talked about relationship between the nonprofit staff and the board, but relationships between the board members and the community, that's important as well, and the nonprofit staff in the community. And then when we're removing these different positions, you know, let's start going back and looking at, because it seems like there were some things that were going on. That means their policies and procedures weren't being looked at, and maybe there weren't assessments going on routinely to look at whether these people were doing their jobs appropriately and serving our community as they needed to. So maybe putting some things in place for that to happen as well. So I think that's, it for that, unless someone else has something to share. Thank you guys for obliging me by going through that. I appreciate it. And with that, oh, go ahead, Linda.
No, I was going to say, we want to talk a little bit about what stage you believe the organization is in. I don't think that was.
Yes, that's right. So what stage are we thinking that this organization is in at this point? Does anyone have any?
They're moving more from the organizational stage to more of like the institutional stage in a sense. I believe you kind of broke it down to where there was like a beginning stage, a middle stage, and then like a end institutional stage that you would want to be at, where you bring in more prestigious donors and different things like that. So it seems like they're in a transitioning phase, trying to get to that point, but they're hitting a few roadblocks of getting to that point because they're living in a different reality.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would say they are in the institutional, this was an institutional phase. And I say that because, again, modeling this off of, an experience, that's where that organization was. It could be something different. I don't know, Linda, if you have a different thought about this.
My initial thoughts was that it was more institutional because they've been doing things for such a long time in a certain way and may be slightly resistant to change.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like one of the comments you had on here was that they were very invested in the organization and they were like in the weeds, so to speak, in the day-to-day versus being more strategic and more generative and more along those forethoughts of looking down the road and seeing what's happening. And that's not to say that, having individuals on the board for a long term is bad, because a lot of times that continuity is really good. They bring the history, they bring a perspective, but that also has to be balanced with new thoughts, new perspectives, and meshing those two together could be a very powerful and dynamic experience for everybody.
I got chills when you were saying that. That's exactly it. It's powerful having both. Like sometimes people think you have to have either or, and there's so much value in history. I think I was just talking with someone the other day, and we were talking about grandparents and parents as well, and just the history that they bring. If you really sit down and you listen to them, that's the same with board members who have been there for a long time. They've got history we wouldn't know about, and we don't get anywhere without that history. Even if we've grown past it and worked beyond the challenges, we don't want to forget where we came from. It's very important. So thank you. I do want to share that there is a password protected site, and that's something that will go out. Linda's always really great about making sure everyone gets the password protected site information, the survey. They get any other additional information associated with this workshop and with what the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization is doing. And so when she sends that email out, it will have this information on it. And it has a wealth of other information. So I do want to say that there have been, this organization, I'm in love. Like they're stuck with me in whatever capacity forever, because I am just in awe of everything that they're doing and how they're serving our community. And this just isn't happening everywhere. And so they've had a wealth of different topics that have been covered over the last 2 years. And this password protected site has resources from the financial. I saw some questions about financing, the nonprofit budgeting and all of that. That's been covered. And so you can go to that site. You'll see not only the workshops that have been recorded, but you'll also see a wealth of resources and tools, whether it's videos or templates or things like that, that'll help you. There's grant writing, there's grant management, evaluation, program development. Like there's so much information there because we want people to have access to that and not have to struggle. You can go somewhere where there are resources designed to help you and they're easy to understand. And so just wanted to share that information with you. I think other than that is if there are any questions, let me know. But also, Linda, I want to turn it over to you, or I don't know if it's Eugenia, but I want to make sure we talk about any final reminders as we're closing out the series. Thank you for allowing Mosaic Beginnings to be a part of this.
Well, I want to say that was dynamic and powerful, Monique. And as I said and listened, I'm going to have some work for you. just based on what I learned today. So we'll talk, as they say, off camera. And I want to thank all of the participants for joining us. And I hope it was as impactful for you as it was for me as a board member of several different boards. I'm going to take this and share it with another board that I sit on. So I hope you were, you gained knowledge from our time together, and that you will definitely go to the Protected website and see all the information that came before this, and also keep Monique in mind for your personal needs, for your boards, and maybe she could come to one of your board meetings and present on a personal level. I think that would be awesome. Linda, I want to thank you. And you did not properly introduce yourself. She is the backbone of the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization. We all lean heavily on Linda. Some days we wouldn't know what to do without Linda. So I wanted to say that and appreciate her, as well as Darian. He's our new kid on the block, but he has become a part of our St. Louis Philanthropic family. So that being said, again, I appreciate those who took the time out of their busy schedules to join us, and I really hope it was worth your time. Thank you, and you all have a wonderfully blessed rest of the day. Linda, you close it out.
Well, I see there are two hands raised in the chat. I see Renata and I see Colleen.
Hey, I was just gonna say, this has been very instructional, especially for our board here at Smart Kids Inc. I learn a lot every time I come to one of these meetings. So I appreciate you putting the message out there and sharing all your wisdom and knowledge with us here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Renata.
Yes, ma'am.
Colleen.
I was just using the hand clap function,
Oh.
so that's what you saw.
Okay.
So, thank
I
you
just want
for
to say
this today.
thank you guys so much. I don't take this lightly at all, so I really appreciate you all. It's an honor to serve, and every time I come in with the hope that it's going to be something that's beneficial, and that I'm just serving the best I can. So I'm honored. Thank you.
So the last thing I would say again is thank you all for coming and for participating. If you have, first of all, make sure you take the survey so that we can have an understanding of how it went, what you learned from it, et cetera. But also, if you have any additional ideas with respect to your organization as far as what could be some potential topics for future capacity building workshops, please let us know that when you do the evaluation, or feel free to call me or send me an email address. We are always looking for what you guys need and not what we think you need. We can do some of the basics, such as, grant writing and governance and evaluation, financial management, but there may be some other topics that are very specific to nonprofits and the nonprofit sector that you feel that you would like to learn a little bit more about, and really look to you to give us that feedback and that information. Hope I see what's great. Thank you, Colleen. So with that, if there isn't anything else, again, thank you guys. Stay healthy and have a great day on purpose.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.